Hola, ¿qué tal? Soy el doctor Eduardo Antonio Lara Pérez. A nombre de la Fraternidad Médica por la Salud, Médicos Unidos por México, les doy la más cordial bienvenida este 15 de junio del año 2024. El día de hoy vamos a inaugurar una nueva etapa y una nueva videoconferencia llamada La Juventud Opina. Y para ello le hemos pedido a un entusiasta joven nigeriano que nos haga favor de inaugurar esta nueva sección hablando del cambio climático en opinión de un joven. Y se trata de Samuel Aredinoye. Samuel es un joven estudiante de bioquímica en su natal Nigeria. Debido a que es muy inquieto y deseoso de saber, Samuel ha tenido varios entrenamientos en diferentes áreas, en algunas de ellas como becario, en apoyo administrativo y ejecución de proyectos sobre el cambio climático. También ha participado como asistente de comercialización y freelance en iniciativas de sustentabilidad, dentro de ellas en la investigación y preservación de los bosques y áreas verdes. Ha participado activamente en trabajo voluntario sobre el cambio climático y las actividades de difusión en programas para redes y hacer talleres de acción e información sobre el cambio climático. Así que, sin más preámbulo, pongo el video que nos ha enviado Samuel Aredinoye sobre el cambio climático en pensamiento, enfoque y visión de un joven nigeriano.
Hello, my name is Aredinoye Samuel. I'm a currently final year student of microbiology department at Fraternidad University in Nigeria. And I'm using my knowledge on background about microbiology to actually advocate for climatic change. I've tried out in many of my capacity talking about climatic change. Today, I would be talking about impact of climatic change on health of man or woman and infectious disease in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. Please come with me. Before we start, I would like to talk about climatic change. What is climatic change? It's actually a damage, a problem or an alternation to the weather condition over a long period of time of the world. And it's necessary to know that World Health Organization actually described what climatic change as a world problem. It's beyond just a country's border. Hence, the impact of climatic change has been felt all over the world. And every organizations in the world are actually working on it. It's so necessary we note that as a matter of World Health Organization, as regards climatic change, a lot of world organizations have actually been working and have been doing excellently well, trying to do one thing or the other, especially international organizations. Some of these international organizations has actually world organization that has actually been doing a lot of research, publishing books and every other thing, journals about the impact of climatic change on men, on Earth, on every other factor. United Nations Environmental Program is another one that has been a catalyst, an educator, a facilitator to promote sustained development of global environment. Another organization has been doing tremendously well. It's World Meteorological Organization. It's an agency of the United Nations responsible for coordinating global weather and climatic observation, researches and services. They've actually done a lot of work on researches and they've done a lot of tremendous work about climatic change and different observations they've actually made. Another one is Greenpeace. Another organization is Environmental Defense Fund. And many others like ICPP. ICPP is actually an organization made of World Meteorological Organization and the United Nations Environmental Program in 1988. looking at this, looking at all these world organizations have actually come together to achieve a common goal of making sure the world has a very good environment. It shows something that the climatic change is a very dangerous, or let me say, it's something that I should be taken very care to take care of. Hence, it's very necessary we know that climatic change is a very serious issue that has to be looked into by different people. So what's climatic change again? Climatic change refers to a long-term shift, alternation in temperature and weather pattern. These changes can be natural due to variation in solar system cycle. For instance, however, in the late 19th century, it's very necessary to know that human activities has been the primary driver of climatic change, primarily due to burning of fossil fuels like coal, oil, and gas. It's necessary we know that these fossil fuels has actually been our main source of energy in the world, which releases greenhouse gases such as carbon dioxide, methane, and nitrogen. Climatic change refers to significant variation in average weather conditions over several decades or more. It's characterized by change in temperature, precipitation, and other weather patterns. It's necessary we know in Nigeria specifically, our weather condition has actually changed. It has always been known that some period of time with rainy season, the temperature pattern has actually changed and every other thing. Since the weather condition has actually changed, which is actually mostly sponsored by climatic change. It is a long-term shift in planet weather pattern and average temperature. It's something we should notice in every country. That has been noticed in every country that the average temperature has actually increased. Even the average surface temperature for country has increased. It is being reported that by 2050, there's a high possibility that the average temperature moves from 1.8 degrees, surface temperature moves from 1.80 degrees Celsius to about 4.0 degrees Celsius. As that few years ago, it was actually at 1.4 degrees Celsius. And if the temperature actually moves to about 4.0 degrees Celsius, surface temperature moves about 4.0 degrees Celsius, it's a very dangerous thing and which have a lot of impact on our Earth and every other part of our life. And some of the factors that have been responsible for this is actually deforestation, burning of fossil fuel, and certain industrial practices. Some of the things that comes or key aspects of climatic change include global warming. And what is global warming? It's an increase in Earth's average surface temperature due to rising level of green gases. And another impact or key aspect of climate change is changes in weather pattern. Alternation in precipitation pattern, more intense and frequently extreme weather events, especially floods, heat waves, hurricane, and every other thing like that. Sea level rise. It has been observed that melting polar ice caps and glaciers along the thermal expansion of seawater as it warms, conditioned to rising sea level. What am I trying to say? We can see that the average surface temperature is increasing. Hence, it's actually causes the melting of polar ice caps, which actually leads to an increase in the seawater level, which can actually lead to some factors or some things that are not necessarily good for man, like flooding and everything. Another impact is actually ocean acidification. What's ocean acidification? Is actually an increase in CO2 absorption by ocean, leading to acidification, affecting marine life and ecosystem. And what's the effect of this? It actually causes an imbalance in the water habitats, which actually might lead to deaths or even extinction of some species, or a diversion or a movement from this acidified water to region which can be affordable for them. which will actually cause an imbalance in the habitat or the ecosystem at large. With that said, I will talk about the impact on ecosystem and biodiversity. Changes in climate can disrupt habitats, leading to shifts in species distribution and potentially causing extinction. Having been said earlier that greenhouse gases are most responsible for the climatic change of recent. Greenhouse gases are gases in Earth's atmosphere that traps heat. They let sunlight in, but prevent some of the heat that the sunlight brings from leaving the atmosphere. In other words, they actually allow the sunlight to penetrate into the earth. And we know that the sunlight comes with a lot of energy, which is should be released as form of heat energy. As a result of that, the heat energy is being trapped by these greenhouse gases. And these greenhouse gases trap them in the atmosphere and doesn't allow them to live, which actually leads to the increase in its surface temperature on Earth presently. And it's necessary we know that this trapping of these greenhouse gases is actually necessary. If not, the Earth would have been too cold for us to sustain in it. Although our overuse of greenhouse gases recently has actually led to the overproduction of these greenhouse gases, which actually continually overtraps too much heat than we can actually accommodate in the environment. What are the major greenhouse gases? One of the major greenhouse gases is carbon dioxide. What are the sources of this carbon dioxide? It can be formed by burning of fossil fuel like our coal, oil, and natural gases. Deforestation. It's necessary to know that when there are plants make use of CO2 as a source as one of they use CO2 as one of the things they use for photosynthesis. When deforestation actually occurs, we actually cut down trees and everything for reasons best known to man. As a result of that, there is excess of CO2 and plants are not available to actually make use of this CO2 to produce for photosynthesis, and in a way they can release oxygen into the atmosphere. Certain industrial practice, we know we are in a world whereby industries are built every year and every other thing. These industries make use of fossil fuels, and hence they release CO2 into the atmosphere in large quantity, which actually affect us. Another major greenhouse gas is actually methane. Methane actually we can be found in livestock digestion, especially ruminant animals. It can actually be found in landfills for production and transportation of coal, oil, and natural gases, which actually traps it also. Another form of greenhouse gases are nitrogen oxide, fluorinated gases, and everything. Another way which CO2 can actually be produced, a greenhouse gas, is actually from cement production. The manufacturing of cement, a key component in construction, release significant amounts of CO2 into the atmosphere. Then what is the consequence of enhanced greenhouse effects? As I said earlier, it actually leads to global warming, sea level rise, extreme weather events like droughts, hurricane, floods, ecosystem disruption, impact on society, especially water resources. The water is not so good anymore. Our earth is affected. Agriculture, when there's not going to be food security and every other thing like that. It has been actually observed that in Mexico, in Nigeria and Mexico recently, there has been some effects of climatic change. For example, in 2012, about 32 states in Nigeria, with 32 states were involved in flooding in 2012. And as a result of that, 24 were severely affected by the impact of the flooding, which is actually as a result of climatic change and increase in sea level. And these actually, according to some statistics, reveal that over 7 million people affected. More than 2 million people were actually internally displaced persons. Over 5,000 people were physically injured. Over 5,900 houses destroyed. This also in the 2023 floods in the southern states, including Anambra, Delta, Kogi, and Niger. These are states in Nigeria. Over 1.4 million people displaced, over 500 people dead, 1,546 people reportedly injured, and 45,249 houses totally damaged. Also in Mexico, before I go to Mexico, it's necessary to know that during all this, the agriculture, the farmlands were actually affected. So about 40,000 plus farmlands, acres of farmlands completely destroyed during this, which actually resulted in increase in price of food. And we had a problem with food security at that time in Nigeria, which at some point we still feel the impact here in Nigeria as of today. In Mexico, 2022 flood, which affected states of Veracruz, Oaxaca, Tabasco, over 9,900 people, 900,000 people affected. Every recall, which actually affected infrastructures. Now, it is very important that we can see that these actually affected a lot of things, like it causes floods, which the flood indirectly actually results to some other things, like the flood related to some other things, like food security. It's actually helps, there's unavailability of food and affect the food security of the nation. Another impacts can be called environmental impacts, like increased heat and dryness lead to more frequent and intense wildlife. We can actually I think in 2021 and 2022, wildfires were actually reported in some, I think, Australian and some other countries. These are actually the impact of climatic change because it increases heat and dryness, which actually which intensify the frequency of wildlife. Another impact under environmental impact is actually ocean acidification. The absorption of carbon, as I explained earlier, desertification, changes in precipitation pattern, and increased temperature leads to desertification, causes loss of fertile land and biodiversity, change in ocean currents, human impact, like the food security, changes in temperature and precipitation pattern impact agricultural productivity, leading to food insecurity and economic loss. How do we explain? I would use Nigeria as an instance. I spoke about effect of flood as a result of climatic change. When flood occurs in a particular place, it's obvious that the farmlands are going to be affected. If the farmlands are affected, then there's no how people, it has a negative economic impact. How do I say? The plants, the land, and everything has been affected. Where people, the investment and everything put into the farm has gone, and as a result, this food is actually expected to serve as to feed people. But unfortunately, there's no food available. The farmland is gone. The nutrient and everything, even when the floods go off or the water level goes down, there's a possibility the land might not even be good for agriculture again. Hence, it actually causes food insecurity. As a result, the food that is available would actually be on high purchasing. That means the food will not be readily available and the prices of things would be increased. Water security. Changes in precipitation pattern increases evaporation due to warmer temperatures, leading to water scarcity and competition for limited resources. Human migration. Climate-related disaster and environmental changes forcing people to migrate within countries or across borders. When flooding occurs, people obviously would want to leave the state and move to another place, which can actually even lead to overpopulation if they all decide to go to a particular place together. Economic impact on economic growth. Think for a country that is source of income is forestry, fishery, and agriculture, for instance. If there's a wildfire occurring as a result of climatic change, flooding occur on the fish farms and agriculture and causes a lot of impact, damage to the country. What do you expect? The economic power of the country is definitely going to go down, which is going to affect the people in one way or the other, and even possibly affect the earth. How do I mean by the earth? The lawmaker might have to actually change the budget of the country in one way or the other to reduce maybe from earth factor, earth section to maybe move to every other aspect that has been affected, which would actually affect the country another way. Going forward, I will talk, the mental health is also another impact. What do I mean by mental health? Imagine someone that is being displaced from his home, is farmland affected and every other thing like that. It actually causes a lot of effect on the person, which affects such person mental health, which can actually cause stress, anxiety, or even depression. And we know depression is a very rampant thing nowadays. Now, to talk about the human health effects, I would like to talk about the heat-related diseases. What do I mean by heat-related diseases? Heat-related diseases like heat stroke, dehydration, and other health-related illnesses. They can actually occur. Vulnerable individuals like the elderly people, the children, those with pre-existing condition at risk. How do I mean? Elderly people, children, those who are actually affected by the heat. What do I mean by heat-related diseases? How does it actually cause heat-related? How does it causes this? Heat-related events can actually cause as a result of increase in heat in the environment and everything. Now think, for instance, the temperature has increased, and these people that are affected mostly are people that have underlying issues like elderly people, young children that are still young, or people that have health-related, and they are very susceptible to this. As a result of increase in heat, the body physiology and everything might not be able to cope with a surge, let me say that way, or an immediate or gradual change in the temperature, which actually might lead to things, heat-related diseases like stroke, or even affect the nervous system on a real thing. Another thing is actually the air quality. It has been found that in a place where climatic change has actually occurred, the air quality might be affected. What do I mean by the air quality? As a result of the CO2 present and every other thing present, and affects deforestation, which are things that can accompany effects of climate change, burning of wildfire. There are a lot of gases in the environment, and this actually increases, as we found in study, that it actually increases the possibility of asthmatic or respiratory diseases. You know, all these deaths and every other thing just goes into the lungs and actually affect the lungs. It has actually been found in studies by World Health Organization and other bodies that they actually affect the lungs. There is high increase in occurrence of asthmatic. You know, it's asthmatic looks more like an allergy. And these deaths and every other input, poor air quality actually triggers the asthmatic reaction. And that being said, it's actually the air quality affecting all. It's also even found that it's actually affecting the kidney also in one way or the other. Another thing, another effects on health is actually the mental health. How do I mean by mental health? How do I explain to people? Let me say, for instance, people that have been affected by effects or impacts of climate change, like burning on their farmland, flooding, every other thing. They don't have an home again. They have been displaced from their own home and every other thing. It actually causes an imbalance to them. They are attacked. Or let them, someone, his family member has been affected by heart attack or stroke as a result of air pollution or poor air quality as a result of climatic change. It poses a lot of pressure on them that can actually affect the mental state of a person. In other words, it actually affects the well-being of the person, can actually lead to depression and every other thing, which is very dangerous. That's another effect. There's actually another one called neurological effects. Emerging research suggests that a potential link between air pollution and neurological disorder. Exposure to high level of air pollution has been associated with cognitive decline, increase in risk of neurodevelopmental disorder in children. It has been found, according to some recent research, that the air pollution actually affects the cognitive ability to remember, see properly, and the neural disorder in children. Child health also is another effect is premature mortality, increase in death rate. It has been found that World Health Organization estimated that air pollution contributes to millions of premature deaths annually. And this, not forgetting that air pollution can actually be caused by climatic change as a result of factors that I explained earlier. Child death, developmental impact. Children exposed to polluted air may experience impaired lungs development, leading to long-term health issues. Increase to exposure to pollutant during childhood is also linked to high level of risk to asthma. That was, I think, I said this earlier about asthma and everything like that. Looking at the effects on health, what then is the way out? How do I mean? We're talking about a problem because then is there a suggestion? Is there a way out of this? Yes, I would have some lead suggestion like reduction emission, like transmission of clean energy. Instead of focusing on fossil fuel, how about we shift from fossil fuel to renewable energy source like wind, solar, hydropower? They can significantly reduce emission of pollutants and greenhouse gases, I mean to say. When we reduce the effect of greenhouse gases, then we actually reduces the impact. When we reduce pollutant and greenhouse effects, it actually lowers the push we are actually giving to the impact of climatic change. We can also enhance energy efficiency in building, transportation, and industry, reducing the demand for fossil fuel and associated emissions. Just like I said earlier, when we can look into other means apart from fossil fuel like wind, solar, and hydropower as our main source of energy. Regulatory methods can be made by government, policies can be made by government, but strict air quality standard, implementing and enforcing stricter air quality standards can reduce the level of harmful pollutants in the atmosphere. Actually, we can actually regulate our vehicle emission control, promoting cleaner transportable options such as electric vehicles, public transit, enforcing emission standards for vehicles can reduce air pollution. Here in Nigeria, there is an agency for regulating vehicle emission control. In what sense? They actually measure the emission by you can, and it has a particular standard that is acceptable. If the emissions by your car exceeds the particular standard, is actually they impound the car or you pay a particular amount and you have to fix that. Another thing is urban planning. Incorporate green spaces, urban forests, and green roof can help abandon pollutants. Some countries like in Germany, Amsterdam, places like Amsterdam, they actually do things like this. Even Finland, yeah, we can actually plant more. We can have green plants, even in very urban areas. Like I was watching a documentary some times ago, and I found out in some countries, I think that was Finland, in a car park that has a covering, on top of the covering of the car park, the plants are actually allowed to grow on it, which actually is a very good thing, especially as much as these plants can make use of CO2 for photosynthesis. Hence, they can actually take some of this excessive CO2 that are actually causing a lot of harm in form of greenhouse gases. Another thing is we can actually allow for afforestation campaign, enlightening people about planting forests, which will actually go a long way. And I think a building in Finland also, when I saw, it was a large building, and they add plants on top of the building. That's a very good idea we can actually put in place for urban areas where there are possibly not enough land for planting. Public health intervention, implementing air quality monitoring system and issuing alerts. That's a new invention we can actually go to, especially companies, for them to actually follow the rules. So can actually give them a standard that I'm talking about the government policies now. Government policies can actually be made that there is a particular standard for air quality, and other companies, governments can look into building industries in that, like machines that can actually from distance measure the air quality and can alert the government that, oh, this has passed in particular and something like that. Now, another thing I would like to delve into is the impact of climatic change on infectious disease in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin. And my major point is going to be based on malaria, let me say mosquito, which is going to be changing actually in Nigeria as a result of climatic change. Changes in mosquito habitat and transmission rate has been observed. Case study from Nigeria, Mexico. Okay, let me just say this. I'll be talking about malaria, dengue virus, fever, and cholera. Why did I decide to talk about malaria for infecting diseases and everything? It's very necessary to know, like in Nigeria, malaria is more like an endemic disease. That means it never goes. Although in some part of the world, like Europe and some continents in the world, it has been found that there's almost absence of malaria. But here in Nigeria, we see malaria can still be referred to as an endemic thing to us. In other words, malaria is still very, very available. It's a major public health challenge in sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. That's malaria. Climate change is altering the distribution and the transmission of malaria, making it more difficult to control and eliminate the disease. For instance, a study published in Lancet found that climate change is expected to increase the number of malaria cases in Africa by 20% by 2050. And that's a very serious thing, because the world is moving in a way that they are trying to reduce the number of malaria. Hence, but here in Nigeria and Africa, it's looking at the progression or the occurrence of malaria is about to increase about 20%, which is going to cause a lot of havoc here. And this can actually be due to flooding. how do I explain? When there's flood, there's going to be, at some point, the water is going to be stagnant. This allows for a breeding site for mosquito, for malaria. And this, as a result of flooding occurring, the water quality is found to reduce and every other thing, which actually contributes to the spread of malaria. It allows for the growth of malaria, everything growing, the larva growing and every other thing, and allow for the growth of mosquito. When mosquito, it's, we obviously know that the mosquito is actually possible as a result of presence of female anopheles mosquito that are actually carrying the thing. They are like a vector of malaria. So indirectly, the presence of the breeding site as a result of flooding for malaria, for mosquito, actually increases the occurrence pattern or the ability or the presence of malaria, which increases the presence of mosquito, which actually is a very dangerous. We're looking at how much World Health Organization invests in taking care of malaria in Nigeria, in Africa, in the world, and how much Nigeria its system actually, it's actually malaria is something that actually has the potential to stress out even the workers, health workers in the hospital during its outbreak. In sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, climate is also has a significant impact on infectious disease. Just as I said, like malaria. Dengue virus is another one. It's another infectious disease that is impacted by climatic change. A study published in Natural Climatic Change found that climate change is expected to increase geological range of dengue virus by 20% by 2050 also. Another case study I'm going to be talking about is cholera. Cholera is a waterborne disease that is often linked to flooding and poor water quality. And we know, observed from Nigeria and Mexico, we found in 2022, 2012, the impact of climatic change in form of flooding in the country and every other thing. And they said cholera is a waterborne disease. Hence, when there's flooding, there's a possibility for a breeding site for cholera, the presence of poor water quality, and the climatic change is expected to increase the frequency and severity of flooding events. We know that the frequency and the severity of flooding events is more as a result of climatic change, making it difficult to control cholera outbreak. Because, how do I explain this? Cholera occurs, right? But cholera actually needs poor water. It's a waterborne disease that actually needs poor water quality or flooding. It's linked to water, and we know climatic change actually comes with flooding and every other thing. Hence, since there's flooding and poor water quality as a result of climatic change, there's a possibility to increase the occurrence of cholera, which is it was even observed that cholera has a possibility to increase by 50% in 2050 in Africa. Despite these differences in climate and geographical between sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America, there are some similarities in impact of climate change on infectious disease. Both regions are experiencing increased transmission of malaria and dengue fever. Both are facing challenges in controlling and eliminating diseases. Although Africa is found in another region, so Latin America is found in another region. But one thing we have in common, although we are found in different regions of the world, which means we are geographically different. Our climatic conditions are actually different, but there's something that is very peculiar to both of us. Both continents, is actually the effect of malaria and every other infective diseases are found to go hand in hand. That means they have a similarity. Despite these similarities, it's necessary to know that there are some differences, like in impact of climate change on infectious disease between sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America. For example, sub-Saharan Africa is experiencing more severe impact from malaria and dengue fever due to geographical location and sociological condition. Latin America, on the other hand, is experiencing more severe impact from cholera and other waterborne disease due to water quality issue and flooding events. This being said, it's very necessary we know that these climatic change actually have ability to actually increase the effects on Earth. Now, it's very necessary we look for a way out. Then we've been discussing the impact on man. We talked about every other factor on man, its stroke, what air quality and every other thing. Then we move to infectious diseases and every other thing. Then what is the way out? Like, how do I mean? We are health workers. You are health workers. How do we find a way out? Number one thing we can do is actually enlighten people. It is being said that people with knowledge, when people have knowledge, when they have knowledge about something, there's already possibly a way out. We can do little in our own ways. How do I explain? Here in Nigeria, there are a lot of, in Obafinawa University specifically, there are a lot of organizations here that actually do one thing or the other, enlightening the people about the effect of climate change and every other thing, and forming alliance with them. That's as individuals or as NGOs. What am I saying? As NGO, there's an impact. Governments and NGOs have critical role to play in migrating the impact of climate change on infectious disease. For example, policy framework and funding support can help ensure that public health intervention are effective and suitable. Just like NGOs, we can, if NGO as a body, they can actually, apart from do more than enlightening people, they can more funding available for hospitals, for everything to be able to take care of, or let me say, public health intervention just to be effective and sustainable. International organizations like World Health Organization are also playing critical role in addressing intersection of climatic change and health. The World Health Organization has developed a range of tools and resources to help countries prepare for and respond to climate-related health challenges. Public health programs and policy. Another opportunity for collaboration is through public health program and policy. For example, countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America will work together to develop, implement effective interventions to control and eliminate infectious diseases. We can actually look technology and knowledge transfer at critical group to ensure the public intervention are effective and sustainable. For example, countries in Sub-Saharan Africa and Latin America could share best practices and technologies to improve their public health system. That means about governments and every other governments, NGOs, and health programs and policy. As health workers ourselves, we can actually do more research in a way and seek for grants if we don't have the financial capacity, or as an organization in public health, we can look at the rapid impact of this climate change and enlighten the government through our team, group, and as organization about the best practices to know. There's no other person that has an impact, understanding of the things that we that do with it at first-hand level. Thank you so much for having me. My name is Aredinoye. It's very necessary we note that climatic change is a very serious issue that we need to take care of. That's why many world organizations actually be putting a lot into it. Thank you so much.
Definitivamente que muchas gracias a la participación de Samuel Aredinoye, que pues vemos que en cualquier parte del mundo los jóvenes tienen mucha conciencia acerca del cambio climático. Cada quien está haciendo lo que le corresponde de acuerdo a las circunstancias, como se mencionó desde el punto de vista económico, pero sobre todo desde el punto de vista de la visión de los que toman las decisiones importantes para tratar de mitigar pues algo que nos incumbe a todos, que nos afecta a todos, como es el cambio climático. A nombre de la Fraternidad Médica por la Salud, Médicos Unidos por México, agradecemos la participación de Samuel Aredinoye de Nigeria y lo nombraremos representante de Médicos Unidos por México en Nigeria. Un abrazo hasta Nigeria. Muchas gracias a todos y hasta pronto.